Good morning, everybody.
Everybody, good morning. How you doing? So Josh, president of Kick Services, can you explain to the audience maybe what that means, what that role looks like for you?
Yeah, so I joined Kick a little bit over a year ago, and Kick is one of the largest messaging platforms in the world. And our founders had a vision really that dates back a few years now that I think is largely coming into fruition across the whole industry at this point, that messaging was more than just a way to have conversations between people, that it was going to evolve into a platform. And I joined the company specifically to help build out what we refer to as the ecosystem, which is basically all of the third-party business partners, from publishers to business owners to advertisers, who want to build on top of the social graph and messaging infrastructure.
In the last panel, we heard a lot about countries essentially being platforms. What is Kick doing in the future to connect bots to the Internet of Things?
Yeah, well, so we talk about this a lot, is that one of the things that I think is really interesting about bots and messaging and actually sort of writ larger conversation as a user experience is that for the last 25, 30 years, we've been, as a collective industry, web service enabling everything down to the light bulbs in our houses and our watches and everything else. And at the same time, we've been dramatically increasing the power and decreasing the footprint of the technology that we carry around with us in our phones and watches. And these two major technology trends are converging at this point, and we find ourselves walking around with supercomputers in our pockets, intersecting tens of thousands of web services all the time. And there is no user experience that has been brought out to scale that intersects those two things in a really positive way. And I like to use the example a lot. If I go over to your house and I say, hey, let's listen to the new Katy Perry record, that sentence in and of itself totally makes sense to you. It's actionable. You use Spotify. It's hooked up to your stereo, whatever else. You come to my house, the same sentence makes sense, except it's Sonos hooked up to Apple Music. And yet, if you come over to my house to house sit, I need to spend 15 minutes setting up your phone.
Can you not hear?
Your microphone is set too low. Higher up.
If only I had a bot to mic me. In that same situation, you come over to my house and I have to spend 15 minutes installing software on your phone and teaching you how to get onto my private
Push the
network.
mic to the other side.
I did audio in a previous life. I can manage this one.
Hilarious. I'm going to get hung by this thing by the end of this.
It's okay. It doesn't look pretty, but it works.
There we go. No pictures at this point. Everyone's got to. Yeah, so the point is it's way too complicated at this point for us to take advantage of these services. And what we see bots and other devices like Echo being able to do is stitch those things together and use conversation as the interface that connects users with myriad services around them.
Right. So kind of in the context of what we're discussing today, back in 2014, Kick launched promoted chats, which enabled users to kind of speak with these branded bots. It seems oddly prescient today in terms of what's happening in the bot space. But my question for you is really, who is talking to bots and why are they talking to these branded bots? What do they hope to get out of it?
Yeah, so we launched what we called promoted chats, which really was the precursor to our bot platform a couple of years ago. And we didn't know. A big part of the question was kind of not only who will talk to this, but who will want to build experiences here that people will want to chat with. And the thing that we found, first and foremost, is that people who are using messaging are looking for these sort of short hits of interaction, whether it be with their friends or as brands and other people bring content experiences into that environment, they work just as well. And that it's kind of this, quick kind of sugar hit. So we saw, things that seem as crazy as the Burger King chicken fries characters getting launched as a bot, and people spending 5-10 minutes chatting with the chicken fry character who told jokes to them. And that was kind of interesting. And they took content from the chicken fries bot and sent it to their friends and the rest. And then they moved on and they found something else that was interesting. So our earliest explorations, we were working with publishers, we were working directly with brands, we were working with people who were trying to essentially port websites and mobile apps into that environment, which didn't work very well. We had some really amazing experiences in the theatrical space with companies that were taking characters from upcoming movies and turning those into bots and using sort of choose your own adventure kind of storytelling as a way to introduce characters and build anticipation for movies. And we saw the whole spectrum, young and old, of our users engage with these experiences, have a great time with some, not as great with others. And I think probably the most important thing that we learned from that whole experience, which in some ways brings us to this room, is that one of the hardest things about all of this was that nobody knew how to build these things. That you start out building a platform, and as a technologist, you build some APIs, and now people can write code. But when you start thinking about storytelling, and you start thinking about creativity, and you start thinking about integrating existing content that's being produced at scale, people needed tools more than anything else. And so when we set out to relaunch our bot platform, one of the things that we've really emphasized is we said, for this to really take off, there is a whole new layer of developer and a whole new development opportunity around building frameworks, tools, analytics, writing environments, et cetera, that creative people can use to get into this. And we need to move past the engineers and turn this into something that the creative community can take advantage of.
So when someone wants to build a bot for the Kik platform, whether it be a brand or a content creator, do they come to you first, or do they go to a bot studio or someone who's already creating bots in that space? What's the process like?
Ivar, raise your hand. Where's Ivar? Way in back. Okay. You see Ivar, and he hooks you up. So there's a couple of things. You can go to dev.kik.com, and you can sign up for our developer program. You can download all the documentation you need. We actually have a bot that walks you through the whole setup process for your own bot,
good. So
lets you claim your name,
for
and
onboarding.
the rest of it. We think automation's great. Small company. And and then we have a number of different programs that we use to support developer partners. The other thing that we do is we have a growing number of companies that are either service providers who help other companies build bots, or are technology companies that have authoring tools for building bots. And we can refer you to people that can help you if you're not interested in just working with bots at the API level.
You have this great quote that I've seen floating around the internet where you say, bots are to apps as dating is to marriage. So what does that mean to you exactly, and why is that better for brands?
Well, so what that basically, I get asked all the time, so are bots killing apps? Are bots the new apps, whatever else? And there's, I think a lot of statistics that are floating around right now that talk about how the app space has matured, and the number of apps that most of us are installing on a regular basis is sort of less than one a month, and that largely we've got what it is that we need. What we see the opportunity with bots as, first and foremost, is that the process of installing a bot, of engaging with a bot, is much, much lighter weight and less friction than the typical app download, configuration, creating an account, et cetera, kind of a process. And that rather than thinking of these as competitive experiences, you can really think of them as adding another layer to your acquisition funnel and saying, I've got a lightweight, easy transaction or set of transactions that people can do with me that may be the entire extent of the relationship. It's a first date, it's all I ever need, I move on. It may be that it allows you to build a relationship with somebody that gets deeper and richer and gets them to the point where they say, I want more functionality, I want an account with this service and can go down to the application level to get deeper into that. And I think one of the classic, bot use cases that gets thrown around a lot is this notion of being at, let's say Levi's Stadium down here for a 49ers game, and if somebody wants to invite me to one this year, I would love to go. I go to the game, I'm not going to be a season ticket holder. I'm not going to install the Levi's Stadium app on my phone, whatever else. But I may very well take advantage of the fact that they've got seat level delivery through web services. It's a great experience for me to light up with a bot, have that experience, have a great time at Levi's Stadium, tweet about it, everything else. And I'm never, ever going to touch those services again in my life. It's great. They've now massively increased the percentage of people who can experience that service at the stadium. You're a season ticket holder, you may very well go much, much deeper into that and say, I want the app because there's a whole set of other capabilities that come with that.
Yeah, I think that kind of fits into the idea that a lot of people are saying, where if it's more difficult to use a bot, then you might as well just be using the app at this point. It has to be, easier to use overall. So let's talk a little bit more about going cross-platform. Do you feel like people are developing specifically for Kik, or are they creating bots that can travel from platform to platform? And do you see a future where there's a lot more interoperability between these different platforms?
Yeah, so first of all, if you're only developing for Kik, I love you and thank you. But if I'm your investor, I'm telling you should be cross-platform. First and foremost, I think it's a really, really exciting space. Right now, there's a lot of commonality across the different platforms. There's also a lot of great innovation. It's cool that you're seeing announcements, every couple of weeks with new features from different people. We actually just launched, I think, the industry's first ability for a bot to tap directly into the social graph within the messaging application and create sort of peer experiences within that. And I'm sure other people are going to come out with other neat stuff next week that we're going to be going, damn, why didn't we think of that first? But at its core, you're still sending and receiving a message, and you're processing that. And I think there are more commonalities than not. And so, what we generally are encouraging people to think in terms of is you want to be in a lot of these different platforms right now, because part of what you're trying to discover is how do people want to interact with your company or your brand in these environments, and you want to be exposed to as many as possible. You're trying to find your audience. Kik's audience skews very young. There are other platforms whose audiences skew geographically different or skew older or whatever else. And depending on what you're doing, you may find that you've got a better fit in one environment over another. And I think what's probably the most important thing, and this won't surprise anybody who's been around doing cross-platform development for a long time, is that you do need to think in terms of how do you architect your code such that you can you can feel native on the platforms that you're on, take advantage of the unique features that each of them has, and at the same time, make your core functionality something that's easily portable.
So there's been, it seems that most of the brand-affiliated apps that I've seen on Kik primarily use buttons as a means for user input. Do you see a future for Kik for more natural language input via the user to have a discussion with the bots that are branded on Kik?
Yeah, so this whole sort of NLP versus menu-driven bots thing is a really, really interesting question. And we sort of see things right now falling into two kind of distinct buckets. There's a group of companies that are working on these kind of hyper-intelligence, ask me anything and I'll find the right thing and and sort of route you in the right direction. And it may be ironic, it may be a coincidence that the biggest proponents of this are also the ones that are the most disrupted by people moving out of, say, search or other homepage type of environments and into the messaging world. And they're proposing these, essentially replacements for search that require you to have armies of PhDs doing natural language stuff and the rest of it. Maybe a coincidence. The flip side of that is that there's a lot of people that are looking at how do we create really quick, interactive experiences that streamline interactions. And if I walk into McDonald's, I don't want to have a conversation about astronomy. I want a burger, and I want to get the hell out of there, and I want to skip the line. So I don't need this hyper intelligence. What I need is something that's really built around the come in, discover the service, consume the service, get out of the way, and keep moving. So the buttons, or we call them suggested responses, we find them to be very, very useful in moving things quickly through a sequence. But I think there are also, there are clearly going to be applications where a more natural language conversation makes sense.
I think it also really helps streamline the onboarding process and kind of explaining to the user what the bot's domain expertise is and what they're going to get out of that experience, which I think is something that a lot of bot creators are struggling with a little bit these days, is how to remind the user what the bot is all about. So I think for most cases, that tends to be the best answer. But kind of going off the bot topic a little bit, what kind of engagement are you seeing with kick codes and users launching promoted chats from finding those out there in the world?
Yeah, so for those that don't know what kick codes are, one of the capabilities that every bot on Kick has, and actually on a couple of other platforms as well, is to produce a graphical QR code type of element that can be scanned from the messaging app and takes you directly into chatting with the bot. And the value in creating these is that they create physical world discovery points. And I think when we previous conversation are sort of talking about the Internet of Things and services being everywhere, codes are one of the ways that we're testing and evaluating sort of how do you discover the availability of services. And obviously, I think QR codes in general have not had a great history in the United States.
Not so much. Yeah.
Not so much. And so it's not, I think there are good reasons for that. But I think us, Facebook, others are trying to sort of bring that concept of encounter a service in the physical world, move into an interaction with it. And we've done some really wonderful and interesting tests with that. I don't think we're really at a point where anybody has scaled this out and sort of said, we've cracked the code with QR codes, no pun intended, and now this is going to be a standard thing. But we do think it's a really, really powerful tool in the bot frameworks, especially for people who have a physical presence. And what we've seen with kick codes that's particularly cool is because our audience skews so young, when you walk into a dressing room in a retailer and they've got a kick code in the dressing room that allows you to request a different size or something else, it's almost like a secret handshake that the brand is saying, we're down with Kick too. We're coming to meet you in the space that you're comfortable in. And that part of it, I think, is really exciting, that it really is kind of a dog whistle in a way to the next generation of consumers that your brand gets messaging.
Yeah, I understand why they're different across platforms, whether it be Kick or Snapchat or Messenger. But it really feels like the kind of thing that should be standardized, but also not necessarily in the best interest of the platforms. So yeah, maybe something to think about for the future.
Yeah, listen, I think there's an argument that if you can turn it into an arms race and you get more codes in the world than anybody else, that there's probably a win there for somebody.
Then you become the standard.
But you become the standard if you open it up. Mm-hmm. And I think that the user benefit ultimately around this stuff is going to keep coming back to the idea that everybody, consumers, businesses, brands, and the platforms all win when messaging and conversation in general becomes a consistently applicable way for me to interact with and consume services that are around me. And ultimately, if I'm a merchant, I don't want to have to pick between Snapchat and Facebook and Kick and the rest of that. I want to say I did the work. I actually did the work a long time ago to build web services to enable the website that you sold me 25 years ago and told me I had to have to be in business. And every year there's been some new IT project that I've had to take on to stay current. All I want is that to work with my consumers, and if I've been investing in that, what I want is to be rewarded and recognized for having had the presence to build out some structure.
Well, I had plenty more questions, but we're out of time. So Josh, thank you very much. Josh Jacobs.
My pleasure. Thanks, everyone.